What's up, everyone? This is Kurt coming back to you for the Lionshare Poker Academy. We're going to do part two of this Sunday Million that I recorded. Spoiler alert, I do not win. I literally just busted it a little while ago. I don't know if we'll get to that part in the video, but we had a raise call Jack 10 for 10 big blinds, ran to Ace 8, weren't able to win, and then we just had no spots until we got down to 10 big blinds. Ended up jamming pocket fives with 10 bigs from the low jack, and big blind had pocket sixes, so good game us. We did get to move up a small pay jump, but I mean, obviously not what we were looking for. So I'm not playing the rest of the day, and I guess the rest of the stuff I'm just doing is getting ready to have streams going, hopefully this week. I mean, tomorrow if I can get everything set up, but definitely want to start streaming as soon as possible, and probably going to work to do all that stuff today. But I think I just want to start with trying to finish off this little series because I want to do a little bit more poker stuff today and want to see if there are any more pretty interesting spots to go over here. I mean, we did go through 11,000 people to finish, I think, maybe 64th, 63rd, something like that. So obviously there was a lot of luck and a lot of interesting spots on the way to getting there. So just going to see if we can finish this out in two parts here and then, see what we got. I think we left off on the pocket aces last hand, so we're going to move on from there. Easy defend here with the 6-5 offsuit. I would be expecting a pretty high frequency bet from this opponent, but I mean, maybe. Yeah, okay, so again, when I expect my opponents to have a pretty high frequency bet, c-bet in spots, and then they don't, that just tells me they either have a hand they probably shouldn't be checking too much. Like, I would assume you can just bet range for a small size on this board. So hands like pocket eights, hands like ace five, then like every hand basically I'm thinking should be able to just bet their range here, and I'm not going to be able to defend appropriately versus the size here. But so I'm always going to play more cautiously when I see somebody checking a spot where they should be betting a lot. That being said, I don't remember what I did here. I wouldn't be surprised if I just folded because, again, I think this player is probably stronger in his range than he should be, so I think my 5 has a little less value here. King's also a pretty good turn card for our opponents. Yeah, we do still continue, which I guess is fine. If it is a strong card and he has if he's betting or checking hands that he should be betting, he's also checking bad hands that he should be betting as well, so he can still have some air here. Maybe he bets like the ace 10 or maybe just a pure bluff with like the 7-8 of diamonds. And then we obviously have to fold here on the river. I don't feel like that call on the turn was necessarily great, but maybe a little too strong for us to fold. I wouldn't hate a fold in that spot, though. Gonna call the ace-8 suited here. I think we're gonna be pretty high frequency call in this spot. I think it's a little too weak to get in and a little too strong to be bluffing, so I like calling here. And I think I contemplated betting here. I mean, really, you can't go wrong with checking your betting. I think it's fine for us to clear out some equity. Like if there's some sort of king queen or queen jack hand that might just fold to a bet on the flop, we can also turn backdoors. But also our ace high is good a fair amount of the time. We can also turn backdoor straight draws, any 5 or 6, and then of course flush draws with the clubs, and then we just may have the best hand too. So fine with checking here, although I wouldn't hate a bet, and then we obviously have to fold versus a turn bet. Easy open with the ace 7 here. This is a board where I think we probably want to have some sort of a checking range here. He's going to have a fair amount here from flush draws to backdoor flush draws, and he's going to have plenty of straight draws, obviously, with it. Any jack 10, jack 7, 6-5, 7-6. I mean, just a lot of hands he's going to be able to defend with, so I don't think this is a board we can bet our whole range on, so I would really want to polarize between having differentiate with having a checking range and then probably mostly big bet strategy here, so big bet or check. I think this hand probably falls pretty good into the check category. I mean, our hand could still be good. We can turn some equity with straight draws. We also have the ace that's good for us. And on this card, I think this is pretty close. I don't remember what I did. I wouldn't hate a call here. The only thing that sucks is we block some hands he's going to be bluffing with. His 7-6, his 10-7, his jack 7. I don't think the ace of diamonds is super relevant. He could be betting ace high diamond draws, but I would assume that would be a good combo for him to have in his checking range and then bet his weaker draws, diamond draws. So I would much rather call like a hand like ace deuce here, ace 3, because he's unblocked his straight draws here. That being said, I think our hand might still be a little too strong to just be folding. We do end up folding. I don't hate it, But, for the reason I said, we do block some of his straight draws with R7. I don't think our diamond is as relevant as I would have thought it was, or as I remember thinking it was on the flop. But either way, we won't get into that too much. I think it's equities are pretty close between calling and folding there. If you bet smaller, I would definitely call. If you bet bigger, I would definitely fold. So I think it was pretty close. I'm going to get called twice here. Kind of a weird board. There's not a whole lot our opponents can have. I mean, I think this player can have full weight, pocket threes, pocket twos. I think this opponent here will have pocket nines at the strongest. Maybe he flats a hand like pocket threes or deuces, but I don't think it's full weight. And then, of course, we are going to have most of the overpairs here. So our opponents definitely have some stronger hands to continue with, but they don't have a ton of nutted hands. So I think we could definitely have some sort of a betting frequency here. Probably not a super high one, and we probably still want to bet the majority of our better hands that need protection, and then hands that have good backdoors, say like our Jack 10 of clubs, our Queen Jack of hearts, maybe even our Ace 4 of diamonds, things like that, and then just kind of check and reevaluate with our hands around this strength that have some showdown value but aren't necessarily great bluffing candidates. And then on this turn, I think we're probably just in showdown mode. I still don't see a whole reason for betting here. I mean, maybe we get a hand like, Ace 3 to fold or something of that nature, but, we have two opponents to worry about, and I don't think this hand is quite weak enough to be betting with. I think we're probably bluffing too much. We're bluffing this hand. And I was going to say if this checked to us, this would be pretty interesting. King's decent for our range when we check twice, but I also expect our opponents to have a lot of King X. Obviously, facing a bet, I mean, we have a pretty easy decision, but it would have been interesting to see if I would have considered turning my hand into a bluff there. Blocking the King 10 of diamonds, I think, is fairly relevant. But yeah, anyway, we won't spend too much more time on that. I'm going to defend the Ace 6 here, the big blind versus middle position. And versus this position, he's going to have a bit of a tighter range. So we are getting a pretty good price to call here, but I still don't think this Ace X is quite strong enough to continue with. If we had some sort of backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw, I would definitely consider it more than just the bare Ace 6 off. If this was an open from the button or the cutoff, I might flick in a call because their ranges are going to be quite a bit wider than this one right here, but I think we have a pretty easy fold even versus a small bet size on a board like this. So. And then with the pocket jacks, we are effectively 28 big blinds deep. This player makes it, I mean, not really on the bigger side. I mean, this is pretty standard size, I guess. So, but I think with pocket jacks, we just have a super easy decision. I mean, hand's too strong to call, but a little, I mean, it's not strong enough to slow play. Like, I would definitely have some slow plays with my pocket kings, pocket aces if I thought my opponent was capable of having some 3-bet bluffs here. But I think jacks is obviously strong enough to get in, and it's in good shape even when it's called. And then at the same time, it's vulnerable to a lot of pretty bad flops. So I think we have a pretty easy decision just to jam here. And we do get called, and we win a flip versus ace king. And I remember in game here, I considered jamming here. This might actually be closer to a shove. I think it would pure call with king jack suited because this plays a lot better post flop, and we want some stronger hands in our calling range. In the big blind here, I would have to check my chart, and again, we can go into the whole pre-flop ranges later. We'll send you guys the same ranges that we use, so you're able to study these just to make sure we're making accurate decisions in the blinds. I'm just gonna guess that this hand could do one or the other. I remember I called here. I think if I remembered this guy having a bigger blind, I probably just would have jammed to try and play for stacks. So maybe I decided to just call when he had kind of a lesser bounty. So you can really do no wrong here. I think calling's fine. I think jamming is fine. And again, a board I would expect him to bet at a pretty high frequency. We're going to be able to not be able to defend as much as we need to be versus a small bet here. So he would immediately show a profit by betting small with his entire range here. So when he checks, I'm going to play a little cautiously. I would decide to start bluffing here with straight draws and overcards or cards with spades in them to potentially bluff flush runouts. I think this is a good hand to keep in our checking range. I mean, we do have some showdown value, and say this checks to the river and we get a jack or a king. if he does not hit these hands, he's also pretty likely to bluff them, as they're usually pretty good cards for his range. So, but as played, we just end up check folding here. A little perplexed by this line, but it's fine. And facing a limp here from middle position, 25 big blinds effective. I think we would have been pure isolating here. This player's range should be weaker as well, because if he had anything strong, he would be isolating versus this range. So pretty excited to get in more money with a hand this strong. We would have been calling off to him, and we will certainly be calling off here. I don't think this player has a range that's any stronger than maybe pocket sixes at the least for value. I would assume he would definitely raise eights to isolate and get it in versus this guy, maybe even sevens. So very easy call if this person decides to jam. And then a super dry board here. This really doesn't connect with our opponent hardly at all, with him only being 24 bigs effective. I don't think he's calling hands like 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited. These hands really don't play very well at lower SPRs. And so that being said, I think I basically have the nuts here. But I don't really want to bet small and allow him to float with, let's say, a hand like Jack 10 of clubs if I happen to bet small, which he certainly should be floating. So I just think I make quite a bit of money by jamming here. I think I'm almost never behind. As I said, I think this range has almost no pairs. I mean, the only pairs I can picture are 3s, 4s, 5s. And these hands might even fold versus I think we ISO, what was that, 5x? Yeah, so 5x ISO. So you'd have to be putting in 20% of his stack just to see a flop with a hand that flops pretty poorly. Would that be with deuces through 5s? So I just think he has, a bunch of maybe some suited broadways here. Like I said, some Jack 10 suited, some 10-9 suited. So hands that have a decent amount of equity and backdoors and overcards to the 7. Obviously, if I just bet small, then he can call. So I think we just have so much of a range advantage here, and we don't want to bet small and allow him to float with 2 overs and backdoor flush draws. So I just jam it in here, and we end up taking it down. Of course, we do want to have some smaller bets. Let's say I have a hand like Jack 10 of diamonds that really play well. I mean, it would still be fine because I still think we just win here so often, but it's one of our worst bluffing hands, so maybe I choose that for the small size. And then with, let's say, our aces, kings, queens, hands that are really vulnerable to this board, I'd want to bet small. And then say I have like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, even a hand like pocket 6s. If I decided to isolate that, I would just jam there and just assume that I was ahead all the time and don't want to see turns. So I think I would have 2 different sizes with my value and my bluffs in this spot. And this is a pretty loose open, but we have a lot of chips here. So I'm just, in general, going to open up a little more loose than I usually do. I also think the table hasn't been playing that strongly, so I'm definitely going to get involved more. Obviously not a great board for our hand. I also expect this opponent's range to have a lot of suited Jack X in it, some Ace Jack off, being 40 bigs effective, and obviously big blind can have any suited Jack X combo here, pocket 2. So I don't think I can just go crazy on this board with my range here. So we're going to decide to check for that reason, and of course my hand is being really poor. We're just going to fold here versus a bet. Easy open with the Ace 10. I think maybe I'm trying to think. I mean, it's fine to bet this board. It's pretty dry, although like our opponent's still going to have a lot of suited Queen X in his range. He should have at 22 big blinds. I would assume he's probably jamming pocket 9s, maybe not pocket 6s. So he can definitely have a set of 6s here, and then he's going to have some potentially some king queen off, some queen jack suited, queen 10 suited. So I don't think we can just bet everything here. I think I would prefer to bet if I had, let's say, ace 10 of clubs or ace 10 of hearts, something with a backdoor flush draw that I can keep betting on a lot of different turn cards. This one in general, I think I'm fine with just checking and reevaluating on the turn versus this bet size we can't continue. So we're going to get rid of it. And pretty easy call here in the big blind. And it's about half pot. I mean, I'm fine with this bet size. He could even size up a little bit more here, being 39 big blinds effective. Here, he's going to have a pretty strong range. He's going to have a lot of, from early position, he's going to have a lot of suited broadways, a lot of overpairs, and I'm going to have a fair amount of hands I can continue here with. I still think this is pretty close with the Jack of Diamonds. I wouldn't be surprised if this is still a call. But I'm going to assume, again, most players, when they're betting on the bigger side, they're probably a little more on the value to stronger parts of their range than they actually should be. I'm not sure what I did here. I wouldn't hate a call, but I also wouldn't be surprised if I folded. Yeah, so I think if he goes small, we have an easy, like if he goes third pot, we have an easy defend here. If he goes 3/4, we have an easy fold. So I think this is right on the cusp, and I think I'm just going to lean towards the tighter side from such an early position range. And versus a 3-bet, we're about 36 big blinds effective, it looks like. I think this is still going to be a call here, especially when we have our opponent out chip, so his bounty is definitely going to play a factor into me calling here. I think for chips anyway, it's still just a call, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm sure for 40 it is. I'm sure with 30 it gets close, so I'm not sure exactly how many or how light we're supposed, or how short our chip stack should be in order to defend here versus a 3-bet, but I think this is fine either way. And this is probably a little close. Again, I'm probably just going to play a little more towards the passive side when we're out of position and we're facing an aggression from an, I mean, he is unknown to me, I guess, but I have a fair amount of hands on him. So this is close anyway, so I wouldn't be, that upset if we folded here. Although I think that hand might be able to maybe get in there somehow. I wouldn't hate, obviously it's a little too weak to check call, but check raise there might be a thing at a frequency. And versus this limp, obviously we have a very easy check back here with the 6-3 offsuit. I'm not exactly sure what this range should be, or if this is balanced at all. I don't have many hands on this opponent. And then versus this big bet size, I'm just pitching this. I'm getting rid of this. I have no idea what his range here. I'm not thrilled to have this pair in this spot. I mean, we can already be dead or severely behind, so I'm just fine with giving this up. And how deep are we here? Come on, stats. Okay, there we go. So we're 36 big blinds effective here. I think this hand is too weak to be getting in for all in before the flop. And then also I think this hand is too strong to be 3-bet bluffing with, so I think that's going to equate into a pretty high frequency call. We would have called here versus a small C-bet, maybe even versus a bigger C-bet with the 2 overcards at the backdoor flush draw as played. I think we just check here. We have a hand that has good showdown value, also can turn backdoor flush draws, and of course overcards. He could bluff the 10, he could bluff the ace, so pretty easy check, I would say. Versus check here again, I think we should mix in checks even with our strongest 10x. I mean, this is going to be the one we want to be betting the most, of course. But also, if, say, we're playing more capable opponents, I would assume that they would have, and not to say this guy isn't capable, I have a fair amount of hands, so maybe he is capable of having some check raises with value and bluffs, but I just think the average opponent is not going to have the proper amount of check raises for value and bluffs here, as they should, so I think we can be a little more face-up with our value here, especially with our best 10x, so I think we're going to start betting here. We could also have some slow plays with like some 9x. Let's say our weaker 9x could check here at a frequency. But yeah, so we still do have some very strong hands here. Even pocket 4s might be able to slow play flop sometimes. And yeah, we're just going to take it down here. As for the bet size, I think we can go small or bigger here. I'm not exactly sure which I prefer in this spot. I think I prefer just check calling or just betting small. Just as an exploit, because when he just check calls versus a small bet, I just think we have the nuts almost always. And if we bet big here, he could definitely be trapping some bigger hands just because he sees us putting in a lot of money, so he wants to end up slow playing a strong hand and hope that we either keep betting for what we think is value or as a bluff. And then if we bet small and he has a big hand, he's probably want to get money. He's going to want to get more money in and not allow us to bet a small size with like some weaker parts of our range. So yeah. And we are effectively 43 deep here. I think this is going to be a pretty high frequency call in these positions. I wouldn't hate a jam here, but this is getting a little later in the tournament, and this would obviously be a higher variance jam here. I think when we are called, I mean, we probably get called by pocket 9s, maybe pocket 8s calls here, since I believe we have a pretty decent sized bounty on our head, and he does have us covered. But I think the rest of the hands are just going to be basically ace queen plus. So when we do get called, we're in a kind of a bad position. And this hand plays pretty well post flop. I am okay just taking the lower variance route and assuming I'm going to outplay the majority of my opponents. So if we were a little bit shorter here, I think if I had 30 bigs here, I think I would just pure jam here. But for 43, I think it gets a little closer. And we flop pretty good here with the 2 overs and the king high flush draw. So this is actually, I mean, I'll go to teaching you guys a little notes I leave for myself, and because a lot of these hands are going to mix between checking, betting, check raising. So in this situation, essentially what I do is I want to be check raising, or I'm okay with checking. Let's say a hand like Queen 10 of spades here, or yeah, basically an open-ended straight with the flush draw. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into this, but I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. So these hands, like the ones that have both the open-ended straight with the flush draw, they have more equity. So if this happens to check around, there's more cards on the river that could improve me. So in that case, I don't mind checking them. And on the flip side, I like these as check raises because we can get in a lot of money with a hand this good versus a lot of hands that we can put a lot of pressure on. So I think I prefer to check raise the open end, like the 10-8 of spades, the Queen 10 of spades, and then with the hands like this, these are pretty good draws. Obviously, I have an overcard to the jack, so I prefer to be betting these a little more high frequency. And sorry if that was kind of a messy rant. I mean, again, I can make a whole video about what I'm trying to talk about, but I do think betting here is pretty good. I also think going for a pretty large size here is good. I mean, this opponent can have some check back Jack 9, but I assume that most people are just going to be betting their top pairs in these spots. I don't think they're going to be tricky enough and are just going to want to bet to protect their equity, which is still fine. This player is also uncapped to, let's say, pocket 3s. I wouldn't be surprised if this opponent, I mean, he should be squeezing pocket 9s. Pocket 5s could even just jam over all this and just win so often, and then even sometimes get called by ace king, ace queen, and just play for a huge pot. But he's just going to win a lot of money if he jams with a hand like that. And obviously, he can have the jack 9 off, the jack 5 suited, jack 3 suited. So that being said, we want to be betting with our stronger value hands and our stronger draws. This certainly qualifies as one of our stronger draws. And since the board is open, there are no possible straights or flushes available. I think we're going to go with mainly an overbet size. We can have a 3/4 size and an overbet size. I think this hand is definitely going to qualify for the overbet size. And again, sorry if I'm ranting a little too much about this. I will be doing entire videos on this, essentially figuring out what size we want to be making with our hands. And I'm also going to be buying the three-way solver, which I haven't used much of. So we'll definitely do some multi-way spots too. I know I'm still rambling, but I think this is a pretty good size in general to be using here. We put on a lot of pressure with any 9, 5, or 3, obviously, and then even with a jack, it's going to be put in a tough situation when you see an overbet into 2 opponents. So we ended up taking it down there. Feel pretty happy about my play there. And going to defend the King 7 in the big blind. And get a check on the flop. I do, again, expect this player, I mean, he should be betting pretty high frequency. He's going to have a fair amount of 8x in his range from the cutoff, like every suited 8x down to 8-7 suited, I would say. Maybe even some people open 8-6 suited here. And then he's obviously going to have pocket 6s. I mean, I have a lot of 8x too, but then I'm just going to have a lot of crap in my range. So I think he can get away with making a bet here, pretty high frequency. And in this spot, although I usually am a little cautious when I see people checking in spots where I think they should be betting high frequency, on this board where I still have a lot of 8x myself, I have, 47 bigs effective. I probably have pocket 6s and pocket 5s in my range full weight, and then I'm going to have 9-7 offs. I'm going to have 7-4 suited. So I'm going to have a lot of good hands here. So although I do want to be checking a fair amount here, I'm also going to be wanting to bet a small portion of my range. And since I'm going to be mainly checking and only betting some hands, I'm going to want to be using a more polarized size here. So I think, I'm not sure what I made it here, anywhere from 3/4 to a slight overbet, I think I would be happy with. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I would probably say overbet since this player's a little capped to, let's say, if he checks back like pocket queens, pocket kings, pocket aces on this board, if he is going to have a checking range, I think those hands should be in there. So he's still going to have those hands, but he's very rarely going to have an 8. I think most 8s are going to bet unless they're quads, or then like the 8-6 suited if he opens that. So I think the very best hands this opponent should have are maybe pocket 5s if he checks that back, and then pocket queens plus. Although I also don't think people are slow playing those hands as much as they should. So I think his range is going to be weaker than it normally is. Obviously, we have the open-ender here. We have the over card to the 6 or the 5 if he ended up flopping or turning a pair. So I want to put on a lot of pressure here with a pretty good draw. So you see me using the overbet again, and we get the fold, which we're happy about with king high. Just going to check how long we've been going for here. 25 minutes. Okay. I really hope we can get through this. I know I've been going on a little more than I probably should, but yeah, we're just going to keep going. Limp here with the 8-5 suited. I think this is pretty standard here. I'm going to be limping a lot of my suited stuff that isn't good enough to raise here. I would say this is a pretty good board for our range. I expect him to be raising with a lot of his 2-pair combos and obviously kings, jacks, and tens. He should never have any of these hands. My hand also, I don't want to just be betting every hand here, and I think a hand that plays this poorly is fine to be checking on the flop. I can always bluff by the turn of the river, and then when he bets, we have a very easy fold. And we decide to call here versus a 3-bet. 37 bigs effective. I think this hand is going to be calling 100% of the time, and we flop the second nuts, which is great. I do think this opponent is going to have some ace-10 in his range here. I'm not sure how much ace-10 suited is supposed to be raising here, but he can definitely 3-bet some ace-10 offsuit. Then obviously he's going to have full weight, pocket kings, queens, and jacks. And yeah, so he has a lot of strong hands on this board, but I do as well. I'm going to have every suited, king, queen suited, king, jack suited, queen, jack suited. I'm going to have probably ace-10 off, ace-10 suited. So I have a lot of nuts here as well. So I do think this player probably needs to have maybe some sort of a checking range here, but he can also bet a lot. And then I'm just going to have some hands that are going to have a hard time. Like I'm going to have to continue a hand like queen 9 suited, jack 9 suited. So some hands that will have to call to a small bet, but then are going to be in a pretty tricky spot on most turns if he decides to continue. That being said, he does check here, which I think is fine. He should have some sort of a checking range here. And we decide to bet. I was trying to think if I should ever slow play here. I think with the ace-10, I would definitely slow play just because our hand is so, I mean, we have the nuts, obviously, and there's no flush draws to protect from or anything like that. But I think since I don't block any of his ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king, that I'm obviously going to check call every single flop. I think I want to put in a little more money. Obviously, a 9 or 10 is kind of a disaster. I mean, obviously, a 10 a little more than a 9. And I think maybe if I was ever going to check back a hand like this, it would be one of the combos that could turn a little more equity if I end up turning it back to a flush draw. So I think I just want to bet this one full weight because we do unblock some of his hands with backdoor flush draws. And then once he check calls, SPR is less than 1, so I think I'm fine with trapping here. The only real bad cards for our hand, and that's like as in action killers, obviously. And ace, obviously we still have the nuts, but I mean if he has a 10 in his range with chopping, a 10 is disastrous because all those ace king, ace queen, ace jack are going to make him the nuts, and then the 9 might kill some action if he does have a hand like, you know, ace king or ace queen that wants to hero call by the river. So, but that being said, I think most of the cards are pretty non-threatening to our range. So with less than a pot size bet behind, I'm pretty happy with checking here. And then we get the ace, which obviously really sucks here. I mean, he can improve to 2-pair with ace king, ace queen, ace jack, that he could be heroing off by the river. But yeah, I do think this might be a bit of an action killer, and he decides to jam anyway. Obviously, we're calling. And he turned his king 7 offsuit into a bluff, so I think, I mean, as played, I mean, I'm sure this hand 3-bets at times as well. I think if he's going to have a checking range, checking back his weaker king X is probably a good hand to do it with. And then when we get to the river, I'm not sure if I like his bluff with a king. I think if he had a queen or a jack here somehow, I think I would prefer to bluff those hands because they obviously have less showdown value and can get better hands that I hold to fold. But yeah, I mean, I'm a little indifferent on the river. Might be fine. I mean, if I do have a hand like king 9 or king 8, I guess he gets those hands to fold, but I mean, he blocks those hands holding the king himself. So yeah, and he should also, if he's going to have a check range, he should check some jack 10, queen 10, king 10, pocket 10s like this. So yeah, this bluff might be fine, but again, another reason I like to slow play here because we allow our opponent to bluff on certain runouts, and then say that the river comes a deuce and he checks again and we jam. I mean, he's probably going to have to call with a king. He could even bet for value himself on like a deuce river because I'm still going to have some queen X and jack X that's going to have to defend versus a river bet. So yeah, a very interesting spot, I think, here, though. but I'm pretty happy with how we played it in hindsight. And then we get aces soon after, so we're running pretty hot. We're pretty deep stacked here. So even though this is a really dry board and, we likely have the best hand a lot, this is a decent board for our range. The deeper stack we get here, the less I want to be piling money in here out of position. Also, our hand is really invulnerable to this flop and different runouts. So I'm fine with checking a hand this good for to protect our stronger parts of our range and also not bloating a pot by an opponent who can really bloat it if we happen to bet flop and he raises. Obviously we'll have to defend and be put in some pretty tricky spots. So I don't mind playing a little more passively when we're deeper stacked and we're out of position, even with a hand this strong. I mean, this is going to protect our value range when we check here. And now on the queen turn, our opponent definitely should have some king X in this range, but I don't think enough people are checking enough of their king X, so I think he has very little of that. So on this turn, I think he turns some queen X, and then he's going to turn some flush draws, some ace jack, ace 10, jack 9 suited, jack 10 suited, stuff like that. So we certainly want to be, I think I essentially have the nuts here. Once he checks back, I think he's betting pocket fours and pocket threes at full weight here. So I think the strongest hand he's ever going to have here is probably king queen that decided to check back. Other than that, I think we just have the best hand always. And since there are a lot of draws here that we're going to want to bet as a bluff, there's also a lot of value we can get on a board like this where there's a lot of hands you can continue with. So again, you're going to see me using the overbet size here, obviously with a very strong portion of our range. And this is a really interesting river as well. This is one that I've been studying quite a bit that I think people misplay quite often. I also think I've misplayed these spots quite often because I think these spots are really, really interesting. So what we see, obviously we improve to a set on the river, but the other thing we have to realize is that if Jack 10 calls, which it always should be, Jack 10 makes a straight. If he has any, let's say, well, just any flush draw, really, he has to call the turn and he just made a flush there. So we need to think about what types of hands are going to be calling us on the river. Now, if he ever did slow play the king jack, the king 10, the king 9, if we bet anything bigger than half pot to 3/4, he's probably going to have a pretty easy fold because he also has to worry about flushes and straights here. So I think a king for a bigger size becomes a very easy fold. So we're really trying to target the, let's say the queen jacks, the king 9s, things of this nature, or maybe he does have some, I mean, I don't know if a hand like ace 5 calls a turn, but he could have a hand like, he does still have the ace 4 of diamonds. So even though that it's only one combination, he still has that. And I think even versus a bigger bet, that hand would be a difficult hand to call with because if I bet bigger, I'm essentially representing flushes and straights. So that being said, I think I do want to have two sizes here. That be at the size, let's say I decided to turn the ace 5 or the ace deuce of diamonds into a bluff here on the turn. I think I could still get value from a slow play king, or maybe even a queen makes a crying call, but I think that's kind of unlikely. So I definitely do want to have some bets with, let's say, my ace king that check back the flop, or then obviously my pocket aces. So I want to be bluffing a smaller size in hopes to get called by worse by those hands. And then obviously if we get raised, we just have to fold, even with the hand that's strong, because once he raises, he's essentially repping straights and flushes, and we don't block any of those hands. Again, we can get into further detail with these spots in the future. I talked about these briefly in one of the theory videos that I posted. So yeah, in general, I think we want to have two sizes. I think we want to have a block size and we want to have a bigger size here. I think this hand falls into the block size category because even though we have three of a kind, I don't expect us to get called by anything better than what we have if we bet for the bigger size, and we get a fold anyway. So yeah, very interesting spot here. I definitely might look into this in fuller detail and share this with you guys in the future, because I think this is a spot that people misplay quite poorly in this situation, including us. We may have played it poorly ourselves. I feel pretty confident about the way that went down, but yeah, I think we're going to go into further detail on that hand in the future. Okay, we'll probably do like another 10 more minutes. I don't think we're going to get through, we're not going to get through this in 2 parts, so maybe we end up making this a 3-part series. Opening the ace-7 of the cutoff, I think this is a pretty dry board here. Rainbow boards are good for us. We have a lot of good backdoors here, and we just fold out a lot of equity from him by betting pretty high frequency. Again, I'm essentially challenging our opponents to either check call or check raise as much as they should be, which I don't think any opponents do. So versus people I'm unfamiliar with, and just most opponents in general, I'm just happy to be putting in a little more pressure here than maybe the calculators suggest. Also simplifies our strategy. We'll go into that in further detail in the future as well. Opening the queen 10 here. Again, very good board for our range. Our opponent on 20 big blinds, he should essentially never have ace jack. He could trap some pocket aces here. I would be fine with him doing that. We're opening quite a wide range here, so I don't mind him slow playing some of his strong hands here, but he should essentially never have pocket jacks. Even ace jack suited, ace jack offsuit probably jam pretty wide versus a player opening as wide as I am. I think the strongest hands he has are maybe ace-9 offsuit, ace-9 suited, and then of course he's jamming his pocket nines as well. So he's just going to have a lot of trash here. He's also not going to have, even the ace-10 combos are probably going to be the strongest ace-x combos he has here. So I just think his range is not... we have a massive range advantage here is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to rant too much more about that. So I'm basically going to be betting my entire range here for a very small size. Obviously, this board is good for our hand as well, so that will incentivize us to put in money even more. In the pocket kings, of course. And I can't remember what I did here. So we are obviously a little bit deeper here. 48 big blinds effective to start the hand. And if we get check raise, I'm not super thrilled with it. Obviously, we have to continue, but we can essentially be close to drawing dead in the spot. He's also going to have all combos of jack 10 offsuit. He's going to have the 10-7 suited, the jack 7 suited that we are probably not going to have, but we also have full weight jacks 10s, pocket 7s, and then 8-9 suited. So it's not like he just has a massive, I would say equities are pretty close on this board, and I wouldn't mind checking here, but on the rainbow board, I think I prefer to bet a little more. It's going to be harder for him to defend some of his backdoor flush draws, and there are obviously no front door flush draws that he can be calling with. So I'm okay with betting, and I think I want to bet a little bit bigger here since I'm going to have a check range here as well. That means we want to have a bigger size when we decide to bet, a more polarized size. So anywhere between half pot and 2/3 I am fine with here. I usually I see that bet small here. This might be fine. It's not my favorite. This is actually probably more of an exploitative bet than anything. I think we should be going at least half pot to 2/3 if we decide to bet here. So I'm not thrilled with this bet. Although the good thing I like about betting small here, and then we just see a call, I would expect him to check raise a majority of his 2-pair plus hands. So when he just check calls, I think his range is a little bit weaker here. And when he only check calls versus a small size, I'm much more confident that we have the best hand now than say we bet half pot or 2/3 because he should be slow playing more stronger hands versus bet sizes that large. And obviously a very bad turn card here. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit of leading here. He should have more 8x in his range than I should. So I wouldn't hate if he decided to lead here. Although we still have full weight king queen. We have full weight probably even queen 8 suited, king 8 suited. So we have 8x as well. So I don't think he can just donk lead every card in his range here. But I wouldn't hate it if he did. And pretty easy check back here with our pocket kings. I think we can still have the best hand, but this hand is a little too thin to get value from. We can also call some river bluffs. And then when he checks here again, I would think, so two things. He should definitely have a betting range here. He probably wants to bet with some of his king x and some of his 8x. That being said, since he has no ace king and I still have plenty of king x, I don't think he can be making it bigger sizes with an 8 or king here. He also never has ace king, so I always have the absolute nuts on this board, and he never has it, which is going to mean he's not going he's not going to be able to bet a lot here. And then for 2, if he does bet, I don't think he's going to be able to bet for a big size. So I actually think the most frequent size, if he does bet here, will be anything between 1/3 and half pot. This is another spot that I want to run just because I think he should certainly have a betting range here, but I don't think he can be that large when he never has the absolute nuts, and I always do. So when he checks, This is kind of an interesting spot. Again, going back to him never having ace king and me always having it, I think I do want to have an overbet size here. For one, I mean, he can essentially never fold if he has an 8 here. So I get max value versus an 8. He'll probably also have to defend versus hands like, let's say, Queen 10, Queen 7, Queen Jack, things of this nature, or else he's probably just folding too much. And obviously, if we overbet and he has a king, we're going to chop here. The other thing I like about overbetting is we never get raised. I think even if he has a king, he can probably never raise because it would just be such a disaster if he did run into my ace king, which is obviously calling. And if he jams, I'm obviously never folding a king either. So I just think nothing good happens for him if he decides to jam a king here. So I never expect to get raised. And then, of course, this allows us, if we have a hand, let's say like pocket 5s that wanted to bet the flop, pocket 4s that wanted to bet the flop, kind of turn their hand into a bluff, I would certainly want to use an overbet size here to put max pressure on his queen jack, maybe even a hand like queen 9, and things of this nature. A lot of his 2-pair combos are really going to be put in a tough spot, and he should be defending a fair amount of those, I think, even versus an overbet. But I also think the overbet would work a little more frequently than it should. So I think I make more money with my bluffs by overbetting. And I also think when he does decide to hero call with his 8x and his 2-pair, that I do get max value when I decide to overbet here with my range advantage. So I do like the overbet here, and we end up getting the fold anyway. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good point to stop anyway at 41 minutes. I guess I'll bring you guys the third part here in the near future, but for now I'm going to do my best to get everything I need set up to start streaming here. Hopefully sometime as early as tomorrow, or tomorrow being Tuesday of November. So yeah, we're going to cut it off here. I'll probably bring part 3. I might even record the other part today, depending on how much I get done. But yeah, we're just going to cut it off now. This has been Kurt for the Lionshare Poker Academy, and I'll see you guys with the third part of this video. Thanks.